Yo, up the bros. I'm Alex Moore.
I'm Max Steele, and joining us for the first time ever is
Micheal Flaherty.
And guess what? This is the only podcast that
combines raging alcoholism with nerds talking about
whatever.
Whatever. There you go.
Oh shit! I'm already drunk.
Yeah, as you can see right here, we've had a little bit. But what are we talking about today, Alex?
Today we're talking about internet violence, right?
Violence within the media, along with other shit, frankly, we found on Reddit.
Yeah, probably things you shouldn't be talking about while you're drunk, but guess what? We're going to do it anyways. So
we do the provocative, violent shit so that you don't have to.
There you go.
Hell
That's
yeah.
what this podcast is going to be. Let's crack one open, and let's talk about internet violence.
Mine's already cracked open, but fuck it.
Mine's 3/4 the way done.
Okay,
This is a brand new beer, so I just had to crack it open.
Why not? Alright, our first topic is our Bud Dwyer.
Alright, so for this one, I'm just going to be reading directly from the Wikipedia article.
And for context, I just watched a video of this like 30 minutes ago.
Yeah, so we just showed Alex a video of this, and just to put things frankly, it was slightly on a bit intense. We don't recommend viewers watch this.
If you are very easily triggered or anything like that, viewer discretion is definitely advised. We're reading from the Wikipedia article about R. Bud Dwyer under the section January 22nd press conference. This is what it says. In a meeting in his home, Dwyer discussed the idea of a press conference with his press secretary James Duke Horshock and Deputy Treasurer Don Johnson on February 15th, 1987. At the time, Johnson cautioned Dwyer not to use such a forum to attack the governor or other individuals involved with his criminal conviction, and Dwyer assured him that he would not do so. Both men left assuming Dwyer would ultimately resign if the press conference were held. Dwyer finally reached Senator Specter by telephone on January 21st. 2 days before his sentencing, Specter aides stated that the two of them talked.
Specter aides.
Sure, fine.
Specter aides.
Specter aides stated that the two of them talked for 8 to 10 minutes, following up on his letter to the senator asking for help. He personally asked for a presidential pardon at the time. The senator's response was that this request was not realistic because the judicial process, including appeals, had not yet run its course. On the same day, Dwyer asked his press secretary, Horshock, and Deputy Press Secretary Gregory Penny to set up a news conference for the next day without telling them what he was to discuss. Horshock arranged a press conference for 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time the next day, January 22nd. The press secretary called dozens of reporters asking them to attend and told them he did not know its subject. Initially, Dwyer wanted to ban from the press conference certain reporters who he believed wrote biased accounts about him, and even suggested that a guard should be in attendance to prevent entry to those who were not on his authorized list. Horshock, who was unconvinced about Dwyer's claims that he was being conspired against, objected, stating to Dwyer that he could not use state government facilities to manipulate the free flow of information. Leading up to the press conference, acting U.S. Attorney West, who had secured conviction against Dwyer, remarked that the Treasurer's resignation sounds like the appropriate thing to do under these circumstances. It seemed like it would save everybody a lot of time and aggravation. Similarly, Harrisburg Patriot News reporter Ken Marshall described the consensus amongst the reporters that would be attending to see Dwyer announce his resignation from office. Quote, "My mission was to stay there until he said those words, then call a new top for our story. What nobody knew at the time was that Dwyer was considering a much more drastic action the night before a press conference." Would you guys like to talk about that for right now?
Now, I think that this sets an interesting precedent, especially for internet culture to come. I don't know between the two of you guys, but just by watching, and you ladies and gentlemen can see this on YouTube even, or Live Leak if you guys are willing to see.
Watch it on YouTube.
Exactly, or on YouTube. just this video, I think, sets a very interesting precedent due to how early this was filmed. It's such an interesting precedent towards internet violence as a whole and internet shock videos specifically to come. Because I don't know if you guys, during your sort of quote-unquote formative years, sort of like the Mr. Hands, the 2 Girls 1 Cup videos.
Those videos that are meant to shock you.
The videos that are meant to have you in your like 6th grade, 7th grade minds sit there and like they're meant to actually disgust you, shock you, and do pretty much everything that you could think of in your like sensitive mind can do.
I mean, but in terms of those, like, those are the type of things that you're not supposed to look at, like, at that age. Like, when you first find out about those types of videos, like, it just enlightens a whole nother realm of, like, not necessarily maturity, but, like, becoming a older person. So, like, what you think and what you see, like, you start thinking about things in a different way. You're like, oh, as a kid, I might look at, like, sliding down a slide and blah, blah, blah in a certain light. But then once you see, like, a video like 2 Girls in 1 Cup or, like, the Dwyer video, you're just, like, thinking about shit in a completely different way.
It certainly exposes you to another level of violence, another level of obscenity. Now, I do not know how that will affect somebody on a case-by-case basis. Certainly, some individuals might look at that and be like, "Whoa, what the fuck?" Like, they might find that comical. They might find that, like, you know, they might find the shock value in that video. But also, some individuals might look at that and be thoroughly disgusted by it. Now, it certainly depends on the individual's upbringing and the individual's upbringing and the individual's age, but I feel like that is a case-by-case basis when it comes to looking at shock videos.
Feeding off of that, I think that's very interesting to look at from our generation's perspective. Speaking as that, we're the first one of, if not excluding the idea between the generation gap between millennials and Generation Z. Speaking that we're the first generation really to be exposed to that level of like a shock.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at the adults' reaction to the initial Columbine videos or the Virginia Tech massacres, it's a very visceral, very sort of aggressive reaction. Whereas you and I's generation reacting to something like 2 Girls 1 Cup, granted, that's not as violently speaking, that's not as descriptive or as like visually
it's
affecting.
Generation defining.
I think it's more generationally. I think that affects us differently.
We more so view that as a part of history than like we are watching stock footage of a historical, like, of something that happened in the past. Whereas like with any of those like shock videos, like with, you know, it, like, you know, those people like world viewing, I was like, hey, this happened in our time. Is that what you're trying to say?
That's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that I think that our I don't know between you two, but with me, whenever I'm discussing sort of videos of that visceral quality, that sort of create that sort of quality of like regurgitation between previous generations, my reaction, at least between the Gen Xers, the Boomers, and the Greatest Generation and beyond, is more. Their reaction is far more visceral than my own.
Yeah, because if I may interrupt, it is much more readily, like, it might not be because it is readily available to our generation, I might have misspoken earlier, but it is because the content that is available to our generation is much more readily available. Like, for example, if I wanted to look up Arba Dwyer, like,
It's right there.
Yeah, it's just like right there in front of us.
Hold up in front of us.
If I had to look up that, did you ever read about that girl that that news anchor that committed suicide live on air, Christine. I'm sorry.
I actually remember, legitimately, I remember seeing a video of her. Yeah. I don't remember seeing the video.
But you can remember that, like, hey, but you know, like, hey, if I wanted to, I could potentially look up this content, maybe not all of it on the readily available YouTube, but you could look up at least, like, information. You could look up the beginnings and the aftermaths of it to that content where you're like, holy shit. Yeah.
Up to the event itself.
Yeah, I know for Arba Dwyer you can readily view that content on YouTube, but for the Christine footage that I'm just going to call it right now, you might not be able to view the exact suicide footage live on air, but you're able to view people talking about it. You're able to view maybe some stills here or there about it.
Yeah.
I still view that as like, hey, you are able to look at that as something that is readily available to you right now. And I feel like that is just kind of like pulling the skin back almost on like hyper violent content that's readily available to this generation.
Now, just to propose a question that one would assume from someone from the previous generations, do you think that sort of offers an idea of desensitization for our current generation?
It makes you jaded. Yeah, it's jaded. Like you look at this shit every day. Like think about like what we were raised as. Like we grew up playing Call of Duty, Battlefield, just like games where they're killing like each other. But then like you can look into like the internet and find people that are willing to post shit of like suicide and like all of that, and it's just regularly
bouncing off of that. The Modern Warfare 2. I assume the two of you have played it. The episode No Russian, where you, honest to God, you play terrorist, plain and simple. You play a domestic terrorist who massacres an entire group of people. I don't know if y'all's parents have talked to you about that in any form. My dad, just because my mother was a flight attendant, I had to sit down. And my dad actually talked to me. He said I don't think I'm comfortable with you playing this game, specifically because it involves a massacre of a group of people, specifically speaking civilians and like flight attendants, no matter what capacity.
Yeah.
How did y'all's parents react to that? How did you guys react to that?
We, like with all the content we are talking about on this episode of Beer with the Bros, we are absolutely positively not condoning any of the actions. We are saying on this episode, regardless if it's myself, Alex, or Mike saying this, we are just in a topic of discussing it from the generation's perspective.
We try and discuss things from the perspective of millennials and Generation Z. We're not trying to create sort of controversies or any sort of situations that can be sort of misconstrued.
We're just simply sitting down.
It's just our main thoughts.
Yeah, with the beer, talking about like, hey, we're sitting down with the beer, talking like, hey, what do you guys think about this from our perspective? That is it. Right now, propose your question again, please.
So, how did you guys, as I would assume middle schoolers and early high schoolers, react to the Modern Warfare 2 footage of what would most plainly be described as shock footage for the early generations?
I'll give it to you from your first question that you asked before this, like what your parents say, and then what did I think? Honestly, I went to my granddad. I don't have a dad, but because my mom's a lesbian. But I went to my granddad. I was like, "Can you buy this game for me?" He bought it for me. Took it home.
Of course, my friend did. I did that. I did the same thing for my friend. I sat there and just went, "Hey, Ethan, my bro, could you buy this game?" And he went, "Absolutely." So continue.
But yeah, bought the game. I sat down. I think it's the second mission.
It's like the second or third or fourth mission. But continue.
It's one of those missions. I just played it. and my mom didn't care because she was playing the game with me. Like, she played online, I played online, and like she didn't care. And then like I was reading or like watching YouTube videos like towards the response of it, and I was like, oh, is this serious? But I was like, it's a game. How can it be this serious? So like to me, like personally, I'm like a super just like chilled back dude. I don't really think either which way on like any type of topics unless it has to do with race or like something to do with me like in general. But I just didn't think about it in like the terms that everyone else was thinking. I was like, it's a game. It's supposed to be fun. Not that I'm having fun shooting down civilians, but like
it's something that furthers the plot of a specific story.
Yeah, it serves as a plot, and it serves like gives backstory to the villains and gives them that type of like.
If you don't mind me speaking, which of course you can correct me if I'm going too far. How did you react more viscerally to the "This Is America" video versus something like along those lines? Something more racially specific, or what was it? Was it specifically the race aspect that stopped your more visceral reaction, or was it
"This Is America"?
I mean, again, you can stop me.
No, I apologize if I'm going too far. I understand completely what you're saying. "This Is America" to me, in terms of a video, is like it's an artistic preference on what someone believes America to be. Of course, like it holds several true values in what America is today and what has been in the past.
Okay.
And I understand all of it, but something like that, where it's art, doesn't really get me in the same way as something as where I'm like viewing it that comes from the news. Like when you see like a mass shooting happen at a high school, or like something pop up on the news like Trayvon Martin or
it's something that affects you more directly because race is involved. Am I mistaken?
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please tell me if I'm wrong in any sense.
But like in the terms of like what happened here recently at VSU, where we had this whole meeting with the president, Dr. Carvajal, about Brian Kemp being the speaker when he was like bringing out all of these with the commercials about him. Oh, I'm pulling up in my big truck about to round up these Mexicans and send them back to Mexico, and like
his Mexican rounding truck.
And then like all of his statements about like women and their rights and all this, like that holds a direct correlation with my own beliefs and values. Terms to like a music video where it's like artistic and stuff like that holds nothing over me.
Instead of a jerk.
Okay, so speaking in that sort of similar sense, you would say that a shock value video a la the Dwyer video wouldn't really apply to the same degree as something like the "This Is America" video, which directly spoke to, let's say, the Charleston shooting within the Catholic Church, or anything with regards to the Civil War.
I mean, I'm just saying that none of that holds necessarily direct value to me in general, because none of that of what they're portraying like is anything that I've ever experienced ever. Like, even though we're in like the fucking deep south, we're in fucking Valdosta,
South Georgia,
the border
of between Florida and Georgia. Like, I know people who have like experienced racism here, and like there's of course the news stories like between like what was the Jimmy John situation where the people were like dressing up in the Ku Klux Klan
and the
outfits and all that.
The YG Donald Trump video where they were excluded from the Valdosta rally.
But like I never experienced any of that because
individually.
Like,
you never experienced it on your own.
Right. So I have no like just experience with that. And I'm glad I honestly haven't, even though like I'm down here in like the depths of the South, but I just haven't experienced it. So I have no like experience with it at all. So with someone who has nothing like that in general to like really talk about it, have I truly experienced like racism in the sense of like what everyone else is like talking about?
I would say arguably so that's a good thing. Speaking since I, as someone who has lived not only a majority of their life, but I would say by and large a 90% of their life within 285, i.e. the perimeter
Within Atlanta.
Within Atlanta, I essentially lived myself within the city limits of Atlanta. I have personally experienced obviously not racism, but experienced bias to a certain degree because, let's be honest, I look like a stoner. I look like someone who would get pulled over just because they were going over the speed limit. I've legitimately been pulled over, and the cop asked me, obviously, license and registration, and even obviously, granted, taking advantage of the pre-existing sort of conditions, putting on the, "Oh, I'm sorry, officer, I was not previously aware of the law."
So are you saying that you think this is racism to a different degree?
No,
Or expectations against it?
Not in the slightest.
Okay.
I think that it's not even racism, considering racism targets race specifically and essentially based around a feeling of superiority towards the race that you're targeting. I think I think it's targeting.
Yeah.
More than anything else. I think it's I find it interesting that targeting specifically has occurred. At least for me, being someone who looks like someone who smokes weed and like does mushrooms on a regular basis, has occurred instead of someone who, outside of the 285 basis, hasn't sort of experienced some sort of form of like racism, being pulled over for no specific reason, being investigated for something along those lines.
All right, let's put this all in context so like people understand because all three of us are from the Decatur area of Atlanta.
East side of Atlanta.
We all
inner perimeter.
All three of us have grown up in the same area of Atlanta, Georgia.
But also, myself and Alex, we have had our college career participate in Valdosta, Georgia, South Georgia, and Mike has experienced his college career in Alabama. What part of Alabama?
My experience has mostly been within the rural Alabama area and the rural Mississippi area, which I'm more than willing to get into sort of the more sensitive quote unquote topics that one would assume would occur in that area. I think, just personally speaking, that you guys are more qualified to talk about the more sensitive topics within the Georgia specific area. Whereas, again, just reiterating, I am more qualified to just talk about something that would occur within the Alabama and Mississippi area, considering that I have spent personally more time in that area.
Sure.
I don't know, dude. Like, as I said, like, I haven't like experienced that type of stuff. Like, I hear it all around me, like from like my bros, like Jamontre and a couple of other. Come back, getting framed, my friend.
Getting framed, myself.
Yeah. I'm again sorry,
but
I'm new to this.
Like I've heard it from a bunch of my friends, like Jamontre, Elise, just like people that I've done work with in the mass media department here at Valdosta State, but I've never experienced it. Anytime I've gotten into trouble with cops, like it's been for a valid reason, like driving without insurance. My friend driving drunk down the road and getting pulled over for a DUI, except like, of course, I'm like the only black dude in the car, but they're just looking at me like, oh, well, you weren't driving, so you're straight. So I feel like in general, most people that are around like the 16 to I would say 35 area understand like how society is at this point in time, and they know what's right, they know what's wrong, like in terms of like this generation and like this time frame of what they've been raised in. So it's not really something that really affects me or affects anyone else in terms of race. But God forbid if I get pulled over by like a 50-year-old cop.
So it's not so
some guy named Harold from like the forests in 65.
It's not so much something that affects you, but it affects the generations before you.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's something that skips generations. It's something that's more overarching.
Yeah.
Specifically.
True that.
Okay.
So let's
move on.
Get back on
We've
topic.
been on this one topic.
I was about to say, I was like, we
Yeah.
have been leaning on this topic.
All right, all right, we're getting back. Well, technically, the title of this is Weird Topics from the Internet and like violent topics. So we're moving on.
I love that weird violent topics includes police violence.
I mean, it should be something like this.
It's not weird.
Of course, that is a weird.
But it should be something. It should be something that should be weird and out of the normal.
One would expect Mr. Hands and not like.
Yeah.
like police violence within this deep saddle.
All right, so we're moving on to Malachi Love Robinson.
I love Robinson.
I've never heard of this, so this is my first time hearing about it.
He is.
All right.
I just as someone who is approaching this from an outsider's perspective, he is one of my favorite topics.
I know.
I have him.
So
I have
wild,
him legitimately pulled up as my like notifications tab within my Apple Podcast, just because he is. I think Alex can go into more detail than I can, but this lovable sort of idiot, and granted, I must emphasize that this man is an idiot and his actions should never be replicated under any circumstances. He is so
dumb.
So insane and dumb. Like, I'm just gonna let Alex go into more detail.
Please explain.
So first, before I get into the story, I'm just going to give a big shout out to Internet Today /ETC because that's where I get all gossip.
Shout out to Elliot and Ricky.
Yeah, shout out to
you
them.
guys are the realists.
We love you. But yeah, beers to y'all.
Beers to y'all.
Anyway, the whole story is this guy from Florida, which Florida... fucking insane.
Florida is the question mark of the United States.
Absolutely.
Alright, so this black, like, 16-year-old kid is like, hey, I really want to be a doctor. What's the best way to be a doctor at this age? Let's buy a white fucking coat and then walk into a hospital and pretend to be a doctor, where he walks into a OBGYN side of the the hospital and starts being a fake doctor that looks at vaginas.
See, that part just sounds honest to God, that sounds like a 15-year-old's wet dream.
I know.
You're like, it's just some kid in 9th and /10th grade just sitting in like health class and just like, all right, think, how can I do this? How can I do this? Just impersonate an OBGYN. There we go.
Why fucking not?
Exactly. It's just the one thing that I love that just Alex didn't touch on is just once Malachi Love Robinson was found out.
Alright, I'm not done with this story.
Oh, I was like, continue.
This story
Continue.
lasts
I was like, if you were ready to continue.
No. It lasts a lot longer.
Oh, there's more. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
And
Much like Billy Wayne,
Another thing.
there's more.
Okay, so he eventually gets found out, goes to the fucking, like, judicial system in Florida. Judge is like, alright, well, if you really want to be a doctor, go to school for it. Where he's like, but I want to be a doctor now. And so he starts up his own practice. It's ridiculous.
Without being a doctor.
Favorite.
Without being a
Or
doctor.
studying.
He starts up his own practice.
Does he study at all? Or
No.
Is that no? Okay.
Not at all.
Not only is this kid out of practice, out of skill, and unqualified by every stretch of the imagination, which he is also, by most stretches, just, he's out of his element. And he is testing as an OBGYN.
No. Not as an OBGYN.
Oh, okay, continue.
But as like a normal doctor, like when you walk into like
a pediatrician.
No, not as a pediatrician. But like when you go to get a checkup and you're like, oh, this is wrong with you, you need such and such pills, right? So I can't remember, like a normal practitioner. I'm pretty sure that's what
general practitioner.
So he has this whole practice set up in like a random ass office building, and like he has big certificates all over the wall and shit. And how he gets caught is this old lady comes in and like something's wrong with me and blah blah blah, and he prescribes her pills and whatnot, and this is what you need to do and blah blah, and he steals, like literally, like she's like, here, my check. He writes checks and then like steals her checkbook and like starts like writing checks for himself for like tens of thousands of dollars.
What a lovable human being.
What a guy.
I know, right?
To say.
So he's doing all of this, he gets found out, and everything after that is just like, oh my god. So he gets checked on it, goes to prison, and he's like, all right, you screwed up. Like there's this whole like news story about it from like the Florida area where she's from, and after that, like he just goes to jail.
See, my bouncing off of that story is just because, also as someone who watches Internet Today, and previously what they were known as was ETC. I remember catching up on the Malachi Love Robinson story as just, I remember seeing the interview that he was currently hearing prior to his sentencing. And it's just, it was the most fabulously, horribly crafted interview. Like someone of a high school level could have crafted.
Like it was just because he didn't know what to say in regards to the subject.
Exactly. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know what to do. And if I remember correctly, when the interviewer asked him a question he was incapable of answering, he sat there and, no lie, he put two fingers up to his ear and just went, okay. And just when no lie, when no one was speaking into his ear, not like some sort of Secret Service, sort of like you were hearing something, some ulterior motives. It's just, he was hearing nothing, and he was just relaying just what was in his brain.
Okay, so was he, okay. Wow. So someone impersonating a doctor was on live TV saying like, hey, this is what you should do. I'm always the type of person that's like, hey, maybe you should always take something that's said on the internet or on TV with a grain of salt until you research it yourself.
Hey guys, what's on the internet is real life, right?
This is exactly a whole nother level. Alright, so let's translate, let's start going on into another interesting case, which again, people were killed, so this is not to be taken for the faint of heart. We're just going to be analyzing the details up front at first and then going further into detail with them. So we're going to be talking about Elliot Rogers. Now, you've heard me talk about a little. Did you heard me talk a little?
You're watching
bit about
videos on this dude for a week straight.
Yeah, I was kind of interested.
It's called research, ladies.
Yeah, listen, that's all it was. But the gist of what the Elliot Rogers case involved was this guy who was. I mean, again, this is not taking away from what happened to the victims of Elliot Rogers' assault. Again, that's no laughing matter. But this is just the details about the individual himself. Elliot Rogers basically was sick and tired of not having a girlfriend. Am I right in saying that from what you've seen?
Yeah.
And he was like, hey, I'm going to shoot people I'm going to shoot up a sorority. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
So, yeah, he had this whole manifesto written up about saying like, hey, this, and this was going to happen. And maybe like one of those three things actually occurred involving Elliot Rogers. So Elliot Rogers was kind of viewed as like the messiah for incels, which if you don't know what an incel is, do you know what
It's
yeah.
for those of you who are unaware, an incel is by definition an involuntary celibate, someone who can't get laid not by their own actions, but by outside forces.
And again, here's what it says in his Wikipedia article under Manifesto and Online Post. He said, in his last YouTube video titled Elliot Rogers Retribution, he complained of being rejected by women while envying sexually active men and describing details of his upcoming attacks, laying out his motives and plans. In the wake of the killings, the video was deleted from Rogers' account, but copies were repeated and reposted by others. In the video, he says, well, this is my last video. It all has come down to this. Tomorrow is the day of retribution, the day in which I will have my revenge against humanity, against all of you. For the last 8 years of my life, ever since I hit puberty, I have been forced to endure an existence of loneliness, rejection, and unfulfilled desires, all because a girl has never been attracted to me. Girls gave their affection and sex and love to other men, but never to me. What's up?
See, that's very interesting. Finding someone who would honestly quote themselves as an involuntary celibate. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, I remember seeing in one video is that a lot of involuntary celibates or people who were considered the members of the incel board within Reddit itself.
Not even Reddit, but just like the incel community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Within the incel community itself, a lot of them leave after like less than 3 years. It's a very short lifespan, and very similar to sort of. I really hate to put it together, but like just sort of violence in general. Mm-hmm. It's sort of it kind of convenes in that sort of young, impressionable male demographic. Mm-hmm. That's sort of between 18 to 23-year-old male who is not only volatile but also very impressionable, who's just coming out of high school and also capable of really being, and who's still in the process of being shaped into the person who they will become.
But you gotta look at it like this way. So like people like that, when you're just now coming into college and like what's the only interaction you've had like in terms of like love, like fucking masturbating to porn on Pornhub, like
that's one of those common sort of grounds a cis white male can come up with.
I'm gonna go to the bars and treat it like the intro to a porn video. Hey, I brought this pizza. Guess what? Oh, my dick's inside the fucking pizza. Like,
hey, ladies.
I'm not gonna let that sausage.
Someone came to
this sausage ain't going to waste, ladies. No, that's not how it is. Like, it's never been like how it is. Of course, like social media and like these dating apps like Tinder and fucking Bumble and Hinge.
Yeah,
and like all of those like. those create a certain place. Like, as you said earlier, there's no risk to like going out and trying to find a girl. You can just swipe
exactly
no,
right or left.
You
right
can
or left,
essentially
and then,
there's
like,
essentially no sort of backlash that one could
Or
experience.
public backlash.
Public image damaging backlash that one would experience from such a experience.
When you get to about our age, like except for you have a girlfriend, but
Damn, I guess I'm excluded from this then.
You don't count.
but yeah, like when I was first going out to the bars and like trying to get girls, like it was like, oh, I'm going out, I'm trying to get some like girls tonight. But after a while I was just like, oh well, screw this, like this is a stingy ass culture and no one thinks that way in general. So I'm not going out here to get girls anymore. I'm going out here just to like have a beer and like chill with my friends. Like that's
it's when you go out initially, at least during my freshman year, going out to the bars and you're expecting you're like, I'm going to go home with someone else tonight.
Yeah,
it's more so a social event rather than just sitting on the couch
you become
right and left.
I think the best way to describe it is you have essentially been conditioned by media.
Yeah.
Essentially been conditioned by movies such as Project X, 21 and Over, 21 Jump Street, just these movies that essentially paint the college experience as something, as a non-stop sort of like,
you're gonna fuck somebody.
It's a sexcapade.
Yep.
It's a sexcapade.
It's just a way that you're like pointed in media.
Yeah.
And just like, it's not true at all. It's just like, you're out here just like doing what you do, and it doesn't. It takes you a while to figure that shit out. Like not everything's like
and becoming and
like
being a single person within that environment. You start out with this sort of idealistic vision, and that like everything is going to come out like rainbows and like beautiful sort of golden valleys.
And not everybody's gonna like reach that point of like, hey, I'm fucking somebody every night. And that's not what everybody wants. Everybody has their own ideal vision of happiness. One individual with certain, vision of happiness might be like, hey, I'm going to stay in tonight and watch Gordon Ramsay videos or something with my girlfriend or something. Like that's one person's ideal vision of happiness. Another person's like, hey, I'm going to go out and I'm going to find somebody. I'm going to take him back. Like, and both of those are okay. Both of those, like, you're reaching your ideal of happiness, and that is perfectly fine. Nobody's asking you to hit the quote-unquote societal expectation of happiness. You are instead going to go out and fulfill your own individual, like, hey, this is what I want, or hey, this is what I want. I'm going to go out, or hey, I'm going to stay in and look out for the person who matters most in my life, myself. That might seem like a very selfish point of view, but at the end of the day, we as individual humans are looking out for ourselves, whether that is going out and finding someone to take back to our place, or whether that's staying in and spending time with a pet or something. Like we each have our own individual standings of happiness. It just depends on what your definition is.
But hey, when you do pick up a random girl at the bars, and you're like, hey, I'm fucking right now, it's fucking glorious.
It's on what you believe. It is on what you believe. Yeah.
It's glorious.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But yeah, anyway, but it's not okay to kill people because you're not getting some.
Yeah.
It's not okay.
I was about to say, long roundabout story short, that's not the point of the whole story.
You should not hinge like the safety of yourself or others on like, hey, if I don't get pussy tonight, I'm gonna go out. No. Absolutely, that is not what you should be doing. What you should be doing is like, you're like, hey, what am I gonna go out and do that makes myself, at the end of the day, what makes myself happy? And I personally believe that finding happiness does not need to involve others in the community. It needs to involve yourself. If I can be happy by myself, that is a million times more beneficial than finding happiness in another individual. Am I wrong?
You're not
No,
wrong.
no, you're not wrong.
There you go.
Not
So-
at all.
Let's move on to the next topic, which is
I don't know where Mike's going, but
Yeah.
we'll start talking.
Pardon me, gentlemen. Give me a hearty second.
the Denver,
Okay, there we go.
Colorado legalizing shrooms, which is
So,
don't know
I
what
have
you're
a
talking
lot
about.
to say about this.
go ahead, bro. Do it.
Okay, so I personally believe that at least in 2013, when not only Colorado but Seattle, along with at least 1 year, maybe 2 years following California legalized recreational marijuana. I believe that Colorado, Washington State, and California are at the forefront in terms of sort of herbal legalization and sort of like these sort of
Get to the
sort of
I wanna hear
get
about
to the
shrooms.
shrooms, to the shrooms.
man.
No, sort of the sort of acceptance of psychedelic
Legal.
drugs and
Legal
sort of
acceptance.
the legal acceptance of psychedelic substances, mainly being shrooms. Considering that a lot of that shrooms specifically, not LSD, but shrooms have had certain positive mental reactions when given to people who have been proven to have generalized anxiety disorder, generalized depression, manic depression.
Just like they did in UK like a year ago when they were like, oh, we can use shrooms as like this type of drug that will make you
Exactly. As shrooms being some sort of substance that can sort of not only be used as something as some moron named Sage would use as a quote unquote
Yeah.
higher power.
It's more so like for
It's
like
more-
something that somebody
it's-
views as like, hey, this will help me. in my
As someone with
field.
past traumatic experiences could use for genuinely practical purposes, not only just the idea of getting high.
Yeah.
Is they could use it for the purpose of overcoming past traumas or any other experiences.
I feel like something like that needs to be viewed. Like you can't use one viewpoint to view everything. Like with anything really. And I'm talking about this case, as a case by case basis. Like you view something like, hey, like something like this needs to be viewed as like a case by case basis. Like for example, if I went through a post traumatic traumatic experience and I had to use shrooms to cope with that experience to make sure that like I didn't go off the rails and do something that is physically harmful towards myself, rather than like, hey, my name is, I don't know, Sage, and I just want to get fucked up.
Exactly. I like that we're all bonding over the term that the name Sage is what we use.
But
Get fucked up.
But there's a clear distinction between like, hey, I'm using it for this one thing, and then hey, I'm using this recreation.
Yeah.
Like there's a clear medical distinction between like, I need this for my health.
There's a difference between
I wanna get
someone
fucked
who would
up.
choose to, like, quote unquote, now granted this is me speaking for me, quote unquote, align their chakras versus someone who would more seek sort of mental alleviance from some sort of past experience that they've had from mushrooms.
Yep.
Now,
So
I've only done mushrooms once in my life, and I will never do it again after that one experience. But let's just say it was wild.
See, but it wasn't an experience. Even though it might have been.
It wasn't a bad experience,
See-
but it was a wild experience.
See, I've done mushrooms twice, and the first time I did them, it was in that same vein, in that it was kind of like you sat down and you were kind of just sort of taking it all in, going, wow, this is a very wild experience. But rather than it being a full-on, like, full-bodied, like, experience, it was more like, I feel like it was taking, like, a very strong version of an edible.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, you just finish off taking a brownie and you
wild.
go.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
My shit was far wilder than the fucking edible, dude. Like,
yeah.
It was,
okay.
No.
Yeah. So the second time I took an edible, it was definitely you took a step back and you sort of took a deep breath in, took a deep breath out, and you sort of just
No, my shit was like
took in this craziness that was
mine was
what
like
was going on.
everything in front of me disappeared. Like there was nothing. Pure blank.
That
white.
was interesting because mine, what happened was I got up, and because I was in an enclosed area, I was enclosed in what my friend's room was. Is I walked over to his room, which was looking over like a garden or a just lawn area, and I go over and look out, and it was just this bright purple landscape.
Oh, yeah.
And my friends were thoroughly convinced by the craziest idea that was going into their heads that I was like about to open up the window and like get onto the roof and like jump off. And it was something that only someone who was on mushrooms could come up with the idea of. Yeah. Because it wasn't something like, oh no, this person's about to do it, let's proactively stop what they're doing. It was more just like, oh no, what they're doing is bad. Hey man, you should stop doing that. Hey, what you're doing is bad. Hey, no, you shouldn't do that, man.
True that.
Which I found, I don't know about you personally, but like I found that my mushrooms experience was very sort of different and specific rather than any weed experience specifically.
I know what you're saying. All right, so the next point is wrapping this up.
Let's wrap this up.
I was about to say let's just sort of clean this experience whole up.
All right. So the whole subject was violence in the internet, correct?
Well, it was more like weird stuff on the
weird
internet.
Shit that goes on, which includes violence on the internet. What do you got?
Which I think everyone could.
I mean, it's just a normal thing of life these days.
As I say, as just an ending sort of topic, what was the weirdest thing you guys saw at an early age on the internet? I mean, for me personally, it was 2 Girls, 1 Cup. Someone sitting me down and going, hey, you need to watch like this shock value video.
Like in terms of like the first thing that ever happened, I would agree with that. But in terms of like everything that occurred, like looking back on it, I would have to say the Elliot Rogers experience, simply because like, hey, this is something that he posted consistently that occurred throughout, and he even posted something before he killed a group of people. And that is like when you really like look back on that, you're like you can go back and experience a part of history. Maybe not now since the videos have been taken off, but you are still you can go back and find copies of that video on the internet and experience that part of history. And for me personally, the first one might have been 2 Girls, 1 Cup. The one thing that might have maybe been like, damn, like this is a thing that affects people is both Elliot Rogers and the Dwyer video, simply because of the violent nature of the content.
Yeah.
2 Girls, 1 Cup.
I was going to say mine personally is the 2 Girls, 1 Cup and just the Dwyer video, just because after being shown the visceral quality and just beyond the sort of basic sort of shock value that one would have, and being given the sort of quality that not only is this dangerous, someone killed themselves.
Yeah.
This is something that genuinely someone died for this. I think that that's one of the first sort of experiences I had ever had where, to that level, I had been sort of exposed to.
I said I've never seen that video until like what is it now? It's about 2 hours
Like an
after
hour,
we,
yeah.
yeah. So I've never seen that video up until like today, but all I'd have to say is 2 girls, 1 cup.
2 girls, 1 cup, y'all.
That
Y'all
video
want some
will
wild
never
shit.
leave us.
Ever.
That's what we'll leave y'all.
But yeah, thank you for watching Beer with the Bros. I hope you guys were enlightened.
Thank you for Mike for coming in and experience, and the lights just went out. Thank you for Mike for coming in and talking with us.
God forbid.
Yeah, God forbid. Should we tell them what we're
God
drinking?
forbid that happens
We're
again.
drinking Natural Light Natter Days.
There we go.
Yeah,
Fucking it.
really.
It tastes like pink lemon. Kind of tastes. It kind of tastes like pink lemon.
Exactly. You don't even know when you're too far gone.
Like right now.
Exactly.
All right, again, thank you for tuning in to Beer with the Bros, and we hope to catch you next time.
You
Cheers.
know what it is. Peace out.
Peace out.
There we go. We'll go to bed.